the President of the United States. He has all the powers under Article 2.
Mr. Trump continues to be obsessed by Russia, tweeting 19 times this week alone. Joining me now is the President's attorney, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Giuliani, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Well, it's nice to be with you, Todd. How are you?
I'm okay. Let me start. It's okay. Let me start by asking
We're not
about
playing
the
baseball.
memo. Fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough. But we won't do the last names, Giuliani, right?
All right. All right.
All right, from the memo in the New York Times, it remains our position that the President's actions here, by virtue of his position as the chief law enforcement officer, could neither constitutionally nor legally constitute obstruction because that would amount to him obstructing himself, and that he could, if he wished, terminate the inquiry or even exercise his power to pardon if so desired. As you heard me refer, it has echoes of Richard Nixon's infamous argument that he said that when the President does it, it is not illegal. Is that the argument here, sir?
No, it isn't. You know, first of all, I didn't make the argument, but I agree with most of it. As any lawyer, I probably would have organized it differently. I look at the obstruction part of the argument this way. He didn't obstruct, and we can win it on the facts. If a prosecutor is looking at an act such as, let's say, firing Comey, and there are 5 explanations for it, 4 of which are innocent, and the President has asserted each one of those positions, and one is obstructing the investigation, although he contradicted that and made clear he didn't in his interview with Lester Holt, which is unfortunately seized on by the special counsel selectively. That we don't have to get to the whole big constitutional argument, which will take a year to resolve.
Right.
So I would prefer to put emphasis on the fact he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, he didn't obstruct.
Okay.
And we're willing to sit there and argue that out with the special counsel if he has, you know, an open mind about it.
Are you making a case that he didn't obstruct, or are you making a case that a president cannot obstruct justice?
Well, I don't like, you know, I'm a lawyer. I'm sort of a conservative lawyer in a legal sense. I don't like going to an argument we don't have to get to. You don't have to get to that argument. I can't imagine, I mean, I don't know exactly how the court would resolve that. You never want to say he can't ever, because you open too wide a floodgate. You might want to say he has very broad powers, and somebody who wants to question that under Article 2 has a big, big burden of showing that there is no innocent explanation for what he did. They just can't do that. So I would like to convince them to exercise some, you know, constitutional restraint here.
All right, let me ask this, because it's also from the statement. Let's unpack this again. You say that he could terminate the inquiry. Does this mean he can terminate any federal investigation? Is that the argument here? Any federal investigation he can terminate?
Yeah. I mean, that is pretty clear. I mean, the power of the Attorney General is a presidential appointee. When I was a U.S. attorney, I had the power of I was appointed by President Reagan. Nobody ever attempted to terminate an investigation. It would have probably been a scandal of immense proportions, unless I was being an idiot. So that's a very unrealistic thing. But if you're asking in a theoretical sense, I mean, it could lead to impeachment. It could lead to, I mean, if he terminated an investigation of himself, it could lead to all sorts of consequences. But constitutionally,
you're making the argument that you think constitutionally he could, is what you're saying.
I'm saying constitutionally it sure looks that way. I haven't made that argument.
Right.
You don't have to make that argument. That's not involved here. What's involved here is a simple exercise of constitutional power with very good reasons for it. And you can always come up, if you want to, with some non-innocent reason.
Does that mean constitutionally the president can order any investigation to be opened? Any investigation. If he says, you know what, I want Hillary Clinton prosecuted, I want her investigated, he can order that tomorrow if he wanted to.
Yeah, but let's look at, for example, the IRS investigations of conservatives during the Obama administration, which never was fully investigated. I mean, they had to cease that because the organizations went to court and showed they were being treated unfairly. So the president can't take away their personal constitutional rights. So the president said, I want it, like Nixon had an enemies list. If he called me up, I didn't work for Nixon, but if Nixon called me up and said, oh, you got to prosecute somebody on that enemies list, boy, we would have had a very serious issue. The person would not be prosecuted and could have gotten the case dismissed, and that would have just been another part of the articles of impeachment.
Right, I understand. You're saying that basically are you making the argument that only Congress can hold the president accountable to the law, that the Justice Department, the justice system, has no authority of holding the president accountable under the law?
The Department of Justice is a creature of the president. I know, based on presidential rulings, of the, meaning discretion of the president, Justice Department is given a certain amount of independence. I am tremendously in favor of that. But that's all the president's decision. Now, the president is, however, constrained both by the Congress impeachment power and the court's ability to undo indictments or investigations that are unfair. I mean, one of the possible remedies here is that this whole investigation may be totally illegitimate. That's certainly something we reserve the right to raise, and a judge could determine that.
Well, I'm curious about that.
For example, in the Manafort, and the Manafort's not the president,
right.
But in the Manafort case, Judge Ellis is considering, for some weeks now, a motion to dismiss it because
not
Mueller
the whole case,
exceeded his authority.
Not the whole case. It's a part of it, for what it's.
Case one.
Right.
The one in D.C.
Right.
But obviously they'll make the same motion in that one if the first judge decides they don't have the authority.
You talk about if you believe the president has sort of this overarching authority of the Justice Department, why are you asking the Justice Department to produce those papers to indicate how the investigation started? Why don't you order them to do it?
That's a very good question, Chuck, and I'll tell you why. Because we don't want the president to, first of all, when we say, when John and Jay argue that the president has that power, we understand that if the president exercised it, number one, it would be challenged. So that's a legal opinion. It's not a court decision. And we realize it would take the whole switch in public opinion that has been on the president's side would probably shift back. So we do not intend to exercise that power. And you make a very good case. The president could just say, give me those documents. You say the investigation is concluded. You say it produced no evidence for a criminal case. So then what the heck is this all about? I've told everyone, and we'll put that in a letter, that we're not going to sit for an interview unless we get all of those documents, and Jay and I and Jane and Marty can satisfy ourselves that this is a legitimate investigation.
So I guess I'm confused here because this memo looks like there was never an intention of the president sitting down with Robert Mueller. You have spent the month, I would say you've vacillated. Yeah, maybe he will. And you're like, maybe he won't. I don't know if you're vacillating because you change your mind. The president's changing his mind. What is real here? Does he really want to sit down with them, or are you guys just having a little fun?
I'll tell you the straight, unvarnished truth, which has remained true throughout, no matter who the lawyer is. The president wants to testify. I know a lot of people don't believe that. I know a lot of people think that's a position. It is a position. It's the true position. He believes he's innocent. I believe he's innocent. He believes that if he gets the chance to explain it, people will understand no collusion with the Russians, no obstruction of justice. Forget his broad powers. He just didn't do it. So he never talked to a Russian, never had anything to do with a Russian. I was on that campaign. Chris Christie was on that campaign. Right. We both tell you, we never saw a Russian. And never heard him talk about it. So he wants to testify. Every lawyer he has, including this one, always wants their client not to testify. And in a case like this, when your client's the president, and they have everything they need, and you've got this additional argument that he doesn't have to testify, my goodness, it's tough. But because our client wants it, we're trying to come up with a narrow group of conditions in which he can do it if we can justify the fact that they have an open mind and that they'll conclude the investigation. Look, we're talking about this. We should be talking about North Korea. Do you realize yesterday I felt terrible calling the president. I had to call him twice, and I got to take him away from North Korea. I told Pompeo on Friday, Secretary of State Pompeo, that please don't get angry at me. You know, I'll only do it if I have to.
Let me go back to the letter. There was also something else in this memo, and it had to do with the response to Donald Trump Jr. The letter says in the statement on July of 17, you have received all of the notes, communications, and testimony indicating that the president dictated a short but accurate response to the New York Times article on behalf of his son, Donald Trump Jr. This is in regards to the infamous first Trump Tower meeting in July of 2016. But this is what Jay Sekulow said to me on Meet the Press about that incident. Here it is.
I do want to be clear that the president was not involved in the drafting of the statement and did not issue the statement. It came from Donald Trump Jr. So that's what I can tell you, because that's what we know.
In July, he says it came from Donald Trump Jr. In January, he writes in a memo that the president dictated a short response. I know it's not a crime to lie to us in the media. but was he let me ask you this. Was he misinformed at the time, or what happened?
I think I mean, I obviously asked Jay about this. I think he was uninformed at the time, just like I was when I came into the case. He was just in the case. This is a point that maybe wasn't clarified in terms of recollection and his understanding of it. And what Jay did was he immediately corrected it. And even if it had been on an oath, you would call that recanting. And it's Jay, not the president. So that's the wisdom of not having a president testify. It's one thing to do it with a lawyer. Yeah. It's another thing to do it with your client.
I want to talk about pardons in general. And one of the arguments in the memo is that the president could essentially end this with the power of pardon. Do you believe the president could also pardon himself?
Well, it's not going to happen. So it's a hypothetical point. I think the presidential power, there's nothing that limits the presidential power of pardon from a federal crime, not a state crime. President Trump is not going to do that. He's obviously not going to give up any of his pardon powers or any other future president's pardon powers. But under these circumstances, he's not going to do that.
Then why put it in the memo? Why put it in the memo, though, if he isn't going to do it? Was it a threat? Is this a veiled threat to Mueller? Hey, buddy, you push it too far. Look what we could do. We could end your probe.
Well, you're not asking the guy who wrote the memo, right?
Fair enough.
I'm not sure I would have written that, Chuck. I think it's sort of a hollow promise.
It comes across, you think it does come across as a threat, or you worry that it may be interpreted as a threat?
Almost impractical. You know, the guy, the president of the United States, pardoning himself would just be unthinkable, and it would lead to probably an immediate impeachment. You know, you get the House, Senate would be under tremendous pressure. President Trump has no need to do that. He didn't do anything wrong. This is a terrible investigation. It is. If you're not supposed to interfere with the president, theoretically, they are interfering with the president, American foreign policy, and the world directly.
By the way,
with North Korea.
If Robert Mueller comes to you and says, "Okay, Mr. Giuliani, we're not going to have this argument about whether the president should be able to be compelled to testify about his actions as president," but do you have that same? Can you make that same case if Mr. Mueller wants to just question his actions as a candidate?
While he's president, the idea of it is you can't interfere. Yeah, the idea is you can't interfere with him either from a point of view of indictment or question. You can't interfere with the president's time, his effort, his concentration.
Even if it's about a potential crime or something that may have happened before he was president.
Yeah, he could have, once he's not president, he can be prosecuted for it.
But you don't believe that as
he
president.
He can be impeached for it.
But as president,
As president, I don't, look, okay. Again, this is not, there's no case, I don't want to let you believe that there's a case that says this. This is what John wrote. That's the part of the opinion. I agree with about 80% of what he wrote. That's the part of it that I agree with the most. Can't be indicted, can't be questioned, because it interferes with the presidency. And we think we also have a very good argument in a practical sense. Yeah. This isn't just theoretical. He's not sitting up there, you know, playing tiddlywinks. He's involved in 4 or 5 unbelievably historic negotiations right now.
Final subject that I want to get at you. We're at some point going to get this IG report out of the Justice Department about the FBI, its handling of the 2016 election overall, the Clinton emails, and all of this. There's been some questions about what you may or may not have known around that time, and I want to go through a timeline here of what you said around that time when we found out about the reopening of the Comey investigation. Take a listen, sir.
Does Donald Trump plan anything except for a series of inspiring rallies?
Yes.
What?
You'll see. I'm talking about some pretty big surprise.
Oh, yeah, I heard you say that this morning. What do you mean?
You'll see.
Stay tuned.
It appears as though the FBI may be reopening an investigation into the Hillary Clinton email server.
So you had a general idea that something was coming?
I had expected this for the last, honestly, to tell you the truth, I thought it was going to be about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Do you expect to be named in this IG report as a receiver of leaked information from the FBI?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, impossible. I didn't get any leaked information from the FBI.
You had no prior knowledge. You had no prior knowledge that that Anthony Weiner was going to trigger the start of a
no idea at all that Weiner. No idea that Weiner was involved in this at all. Had no idea they're going to reopen it. Now, when I say that, I speculated based on the fact that I knew there was a lot of turmoil within the FBI. That this was going to have to be reconsidered.
You told a radio show host that you had gotten some heads up from both current and former.
No, all all current guys working, but not necessarily with the FBI. I do security work all over the world, and I use FBI agents, and I consider them current people. People haven't retired yet, and then I have retired people.
Right.
So the fact is, we had all, our little kitchen cabinet had all speculated that Mueller did a horrible job, which is what I think the focus of the Horowitz report's going to be. Did a horrible job with the Hillary investigation.
I assume you were referring to Comey, not Mueller. You said Mueller. I assume you meant Comey.
I'm sorry. Oh boy, yeah. Please, I mean Comey. That Comey did a terrible job with that. That he cleared her and condemned her at the same time.
Were you questioned by the IG?
I was questioned once, and they were very satisfied with the answer, which is the same answer I gave contemporaneous with the events, which is that surprise I'm talking about were the ads that we were doing for the end of the campaign, where we were going to buy a tremendous amount of time, unlike anything we had ever done before. And I didn't even point out, but they were targeted at the key states. I was even able to show them a memo, a contemporaneous memo I have.
So that had nothing to do with giving a heads up or a potential heads up.
No heads up. I had a speculation. I also had a speculation, believe it or not, when he reopened it. I told the president, don't praise him because this guy there's something wrong with Jim. He used to work for me, great guy, but there's something wrong with him now.
All right.
He's become some kind of a crazy Machiavellian politician. And he's going to pull this back. And lo and behold, a week later, he pulled it back. Now, I didn't have word he was going to do that. But look, I've been in this business for 40 years, and like you do, you develop instincts.
Okay. Mr. Giuliani,
All right.
I will leave it there. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views, sir. I much appreciate it.
Oh, very fair, Chuck. Thank you.
When we come back...